Week 12 of the NFL regular season in 2024 is done and finished. We're going to Week 13 where the Lions, Chiefs, and Bills can all clinch playoff spots. The Bills can even clinch the AFC East. So I wanted to talk about where the draft order is setting up, where teams are starting to set, because there is a lot of teams with a negative record this year, and I think it's more than half the league. And I know that sounds like a common thing. It's not. Teams with negative record and have little hope of doing much in the NFL playoffs, look forward to the NFL draft in April. And this is a weird year because this draft is a little underwhelming. And I'm going to talk about it today by position groups and all of that. So this is Son of a Sports. Let's get into it. The best phrase I can use to describe this draft, the one that I keep using over and over again, is it's a bad year to be a bad team. And that sounds gratuitous because you never want to be a bad NFL team. But some years you sort of can be fine with it because you're getting a guy that can change your franchise. And that's not really the case this year. If you're a team like Dallas, Cincinnati, or Indianapolis, where you're looking for a guy that can come in right away and make a big change instead of going out in free agency and adding pieces that can help your franchise, this is going to be a little difficult to do that. At least with Cincinnati, you have options on the table. You have the money, and if you go in your pockets, you can pay both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Indianapolis, they have more of a set roster, and they keep going in on these guys that they've been, developing since 2019, trading for DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore II, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr. A lot of the roster's been the same for a while now. With the Cowboys, this has been a disastrous year for the Cowboys franchise, and a lot of people in Dallas are hoping this draft can really turn things around. And I don't know if that's going to be the case this time around. I think there's about 5 to 8 guys that I view real first-round grades in this draft class. Outside of that, I mean, there's guys that are really good, but this draft class is different. And by different, let's go into that. Let's start with the group that everyone's talking about, quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders and Cameron Ward are the two that really shine above the rest. They're the two that everyone will keep talking about. But if you look at 2022 in that draft class, that was the worst quarterback draft class we've seen possibly ever. And the thing that happened was only one quarterback was drafted in the first round, and most people consider that a reach, and he was off the team within 2 years. With Shedeur Sanders and Cameron Ward, Shedeur has an incredible accuracy and has a good touch with the ball. His thing is he doesn't have the perfect NFL arm, and his athleticism is pretty weak, and his pocket awareness is awful. Cameron Ward makes a lot of boneheaded decisions, has a lot of the athletic traits, the arm traits you want in an NFL-level quarterback. But he doesn't have, I wouldn't say the IQ, I would say the consistency to put that at an NFL level that you're really looking for in recent quarterback prospects. There's no Caleb Williams or Drake May, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, maybe not even an Anthony Richardson in this draft class, a guy that you could say, I want to develop this guy. Shedeur, you might try to develop the pocket awareness, and Cameron Ward, you just want to beat those inconsistencies and the negative traits out of his system. Quinton Ewers, one of the worst deep balls I've seen in an NFL prospect in recent years. Jalen Milroe just doesn't have the throwing accuracy to be an NFL-level quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier, I think he's going to stay at LSU one more year. He has a lot of traits that you'd like, just has not put it all together at LSU or hasn't put the consistency together. Carson Beck has fallen off the face of the earth throughout this college football season. Drew Allar has a lot of the athletic traits you like, but just has never put it together to be that elite guy at Penn State. And Jackson Dart just doesn't have a lot of the things you'd look for an NFL-level quarterback, but he could prove people wrong. Looking at the wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, the running back group really shines above the rest in this draft class in terms of offensive production. I really do like this running back group. If you get one of the 6 guys that are going to be listed in this group, you're going to be excited. You're going to be happy. With receivers, I think it's a little bit more top-heavy. I think you can get some depth, wide receiver 2s and 3s later down the board, maybe even at the top of the board. Tatora McMillan, I love him. He has a perfect frame. He's really fast. If you're looking for a guy that can create while also being an elite deep threat, Tatora McMillan is your guy. Travis Hunter, he's a special type of athlete. I don't think he's the best receiver in this draft class. I think he's number 2 or 3. But I think if you're looking for someone that is a franchise game changer, if there's one guy in this draft class that can be that, Travis Hunter could be that. I really, really, really am enamored with him. If he doesn't work out, a lot of it's going to be because he's really skinny, he's smaller. You're asking so much of a kid that like he puts in so much work, and he's elite on both sides of the ball. It's not a cumulative stats thing like people are saying, trying to take away the Heisman from him. I think he's really talented. It's just really hard to see what he could be at the NFL level. Luther Burden, Michigan and him have not had the best year, but I'd still take the risk in taking him in a top 15 pick. Ashton Jitney, I mean, he stands above the running back group because he's been elite. He's been special. He could be a franchise game changer depending on where your franchise is at. Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren, I think that's a tight end group you could consider taking in the first round. I think both of them have elite traits. Emeka Egbuka, Isaiah Bond, Trey Harris. I think Trey Harris is more of a second and third rounder. Emeka Egbuka and Isaiah Bond are guys worth first round picks. But my thing with them is, if you're going to take them, I think they're pretty much going to be your wide receiver 2s on your team. I don't see them being wide receiver 1s. And then Quinshon Judkins, I think he's a guy you can also take a risk on being a first round running back, just in the later area of the first round, not in the top like with Jetney. And Ollie Gordon, I think they overrate him here. I think I'd put him second round, maybe even early third round. I have 1 or 2 running backs above him. And those running backs would be Maureen Hampton and Caleb Johnson. I really do like Caleb Johnson's traits. I think he's a guy you could take a risk on in the first round. Maureen Hampton, another second rounder, and TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon and Quinshon Judkins have split reps for Ohio State this year, and both of them have shined. TreVeyon probably would have been a second or third round pick in the 2024 NFL draft class, but there's a recurring theme with this draft class. If you notice Ohio State players, they all stayed. Like, Ohio State paid a ton of money to convince most of their players to stay. Everyone except like Marv. Yeah, I think those are the running back group. If you get one of the 6, I think you're going to be excited. Receivers. Ellick Yamanor, I think he's a guy that is worth a second, maybe even a late first round pick. I mean, a lot of people like him. A lot of people still view those traits as something that could go to the NFL and be an elite guy. Evan Stewart, people and scouts have been enamored with him since he was in high school, and it's for a good reason. He has elite speed. He's really creative with the ball in his hands. He's just really skinny and hasn't had that elite year in college you're really looking for from a guy that was as good as he was prospect-wise. But I will say this. Oregon's passing offense has not been great this year. I know Dylan Gabriel's a finalist for a lot of awards, but I mean, I think they're really just sharing the ball around. And he was at Texas A&M, and if you know me, I am a Texas A&M fan. I go to Texas A&M. And what I'll say about Texas A&M the past 2 years is it's been really inconsistent quarterback play to the point where no one can really get the ball and shine. And I think the thing you can say with Evan Stewart is he was the leading receiver both years, even as a freshman. Despite all of the quarterback issues that Texas A&M had, Evan Stewart shined. And my favorite underrated guy that a team should look at in the second and third round, Harold Fannin Jr. Love this kid. He's like, I know he's at Bowling Green, so you wonder the competition he played against, but he went up against Texas A&M, which I already mentioned, Gig'em, and Penn State, and he shined against both of them. Kevin Winston Jr., who I'll mention later is a strong safety in this draft class, was a first-round prospect, and Harold Fannin Jr. made him have a rough day. And then you look at the receiver depth, Kyron Lacey, Xavier Restrepo, they're guys that you can like and guys you can be excited about. Jalen Royals, I think there's a few other guys down the board that you can like too. It's just this draft class is not going to be 2024. It's not going to live up to it. 2024 was a historic receiver draft class, a historic quarterback draft class, a historic draft class in general. And I don't think this lives up to 2024, which that's fine. Okay, offensive line. Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks are the top 10 prospects in this draft, or in the top 10 prospects list in this draft class. And I don't view them, and I don't think scouts really view them as tackles in the NFL level, which is okay. Like, the issue is that every year at the beginning of the year, we talk about offensive line talent declining while defensive line talent is getting insanely good. And this draft class is not going to help with that. Tackles are a rarity in this draft class. But there has been an issue in recent years in terms of interior offensive line play. And I think Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks help with that. Arcee is probably going to get moved to interior offensive line at some point. Maybe he could stay a tackle. I don't know. Saviniana is definitely going to get moved to interior offensive line. Look for a team like Chicago to go out and get him. Tyler Booker is the best pure interior offensive lineman. The other guys could be better than him, but he's been an interior offensive lineman for a while. Kevin Williams, I think, can stay a tackle. Josh Simmons, he's been out for the year, but I think he can be a tackle. Emory Jones has had an awful 2024. I think I've heard he's going to get moved to guard. And then after that, I think there's a lot of guys that you could take a risk on, all the way up until Blake Miller. I think those guys are worthy of at least trying to see if they can be a starter at the NFL level. I like a lot of these guys in terms of their interior offensive line play. And then Simmons and Cameron Williams, I'm excited to see how teams that would draft him view them, because Cameron Williams is someone that a lot of people have been like secretly excited about, but they don't know what he could be. Okay, corners and safeties. So let me start with the safety part of it, because this is a fact that I have to add before talking about safeties. This safety free agency class is really good. So I think it's going to take away from a lot of safeties in this draft class. And if you know anything about safeties in the NFL draft, teams don't view the position as very important. Kyle Hamilton was probably the best player, maybe the second best player in the 2022 draft class in terms of prospects. And he fell to like 14. I was having him go 3 in my mocks. I think Malachi Starks, I think that's going to hurt him a little bit, but I think it seemed like the Colts could definitely look at him. And then looking at the corner group, I think it's really top heavy, talented, and then the rest is like, pieces that you might consider later on. Travis Hunter, like I said, an elite guy. It's very hard for me to talk about Travis Hunter because it's very hard to predict what he could be at the NFL level because we've never seen this before. Will Johnson might be my second best prospect in this draft class. I think Travis Hunter is really good. I think I'm going to just take him out of that list for a second. I think it's 2 guys from Michigan, Mason Graham and Will Johnson. If you get Will Johnson, I think you're getting an elite shutdown corner. Shavon Ravel, I think if he comes back healthy from his injury, he can be a very good corner at the NFL level too. Benjamin Morrison, same thing. But I think both of them had injuries that ruined their year. Shavon's already declared for the NFL draft because he's out for the year. And I think both of them could be NFL corners. I think a lot of people like the idea of both of them at the NFL level. Takario Davis, he has the resume. It's just his 2024 has not been great. Ja'Day Burton has had a great 2024, just hasn't had the resume and the build you really look for in an NFL level corner. Nick Amenarori, again, taking away from the safety group is the free agency class with safeties. If you're really looking for a safety at the NFL right now, you're not really looking to draft one unless they're really, really, really elite, like a Brian Branch and Kyle Hamilton. And both of them fell past where they were going to go. Kevin Winston Jr., another guy I think people are going to take a risk on. He's been out for the year since the Harold Fannin Jr. game, that one I mentioned earlier against Bowling Green. He played 2 games this year, I think, and then he was out for the year. So that's definitely something to think about with him. I think he was a first-round prospect. Up until recently, they started slipping him down. And then the list, Denzel Burks, and after that, it's really hard. I think Upton Scoot should be on this list, an underrated guy that I think is going to go in the later rounds that some people should be excited about. Really, at this point, it's just guys that you're looking for in a rotation. Okay, D-line, edge, and linebackers. So let's get linebackers out of the way first because I think I only have one on this first part of the list. I split this into 2. Jahad Campbell, I think, is a very good on-ball linebacker. I think he's someone that you could be excited about in terms of having a guy that can come in and be a help run defender and a guy that can be good in coverage. He has a lot of sacks this year too, so you can blitz him a lot of the time. I think he's someone you can definitely be intrigued with. Mason Graham, this interior defensive line group is very exciting. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, both Michigan guys, Deion Walker, Tyleik Williams, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, and this is just the top half of the group. I think all these guys in this group can immediately come in and be NFL contribution starters. Mason Graham is a very exciting player. I think he's a game changer at the NFL level. And then looking at the edge group, it's elite. It's very deep, and I think that's the growing thing you're going to see in college football each year, or you're already seeing. Abdul Carter, typical Penn State edge rusher. I'm not saying taking away from the elite talent he has because he is elite. They didn't know where to put him his first few years in college. They kept thinking, could this guy be an edge rusher? And they finally put him at pure edge rusher, and he's really showing out. Him, Michael Parsons, last year with Chop Robinson, speed rusher. He's a speed rusher. That's what they like. Nick Scorton, he's more of the power rusher you're looking for. I think the lesson you're going to learn, and the lesson to learn, and I learned this from Brett Coleman, you want to draft a power rusher if you're not looking for someone to bust. He might not end up being the best guy, but he's definitely not going to be the worst guy, because the one trait can translate to the NFL level is power for edge rushers. And Nick Scorton has that. He has shown in the Big 12 in Purdue, or Big 10 in Purdue, he led them in sacks last year. And in the SEC, he has translated it to an elite Texas A&M D-line. And if you look down the list, Shamar Stewart, I think all these guys, most of them are first-round level prospects, all the way down to Jahad Campbell. Maybe not in every draft class, but definitely in this draft class. James Pierce Jr. was the, presumptive number 1 overall pick going into the year, but he has not translated his 2023 stats to 2024. And I think people are afraid of him as a prospect because of the Kayvon Thibodeau effect, which is does this guy have a bag? If he goes to the NFL level, is he only going to bull rush and use his elite athleticism that he got away with in college against NFL level tackles? And I don't know if James Pierce Jr. can translate that very well. Micah Williams, someone that people love. They adore Micah Williams. Prospects or scouts love him. But the issue is he's never translated it in the stats, and he has an injury history. And they keep moving him around that D-line, trying to see what the best fit for him is every single year. And, I mean, they haven't figured it out. I think if an NFL team gets him, you're going to take a risk there. Jalen Walker, a guy that's popped up I don't want to say out of nowhere, but a guy that has rised among draft boards. Walter Nolan, 2022 number 1 prospect, and he has been really good for A&M and Ole Miss. But the thing about Walter Nolan is I think he was one of the best prospects of all time. Like I think I read that somewhere coming out of high school. He beat Von Miller for the best A&M prospect of all time, like the highest graded. That's a crazy thing. Wrapping up the D-line and linebacker and edge group, yeah. Harold Perkins and Danny Stutzman, 2 linebackers I think teams could definitely be excited about. Perkins is out for the year, but if you want to take a risk on him in the second, third round, I think he's a little bit worth it. I think you have to try because of the resume he has put on in college. Stutzman has not had the best year at Oklahoma, but I still think you take a risk with him there. Barrett Carter decided to stay one more year at Clemson, and I think he's a guy that's going to probably fall to the 3rd or 4th round just because of the value of middle linebackers at this point in time. Denny Ezaraku from Boston College, guy that has 13 sacks on the year. He's been really good. I think people have only questioned the frame, the athletic ability, and the competition he's going up against. DJ Saunders and Kyle Kennard, 2 South Carolina guys I think teams are going to be intrigued by. Same with Dante Corleone, Amar Norman Lott. PFF has a lot of these guys higher than they are here. TJ Saunders, Dante Corleone, Amar Norman Lott. Ashton Gilead, going into this year, a lot of people liked him a lot. Patrick Payton, same thing. The last 2 years, people have looked at him for this draft class, and he hasn't really lived up to it. Danny Dennis Sutton, same thing. But I think a team in like the 4th or 5th round could definitely look at them and say, all right, these guys are intriguing. These guys have the athletic traits. The guys have a history of being really good. Maybe it just hasn't worked out for them these few seasons. Howard Cross III, same thing. I think these guys have all been considered, guys that could be good in the 2025 NFL draft class, and they just haven't really lived up to the standard or the hype that they were sort of getting before then. But guys that you should probably look into in the 4th and 5th round, maybe guys that pop out in a few years. The thing to note with this 2025 NFL draft class, like I said, it's a bad year to be a bad team. And I kept talking about prospects I like, prospects I'm intrigued by. And I made it clear, running back and D-line are probably the 2 best groups in this draft class. Corner, a little bit top heavy. Quarterback, going to be the worst one outside of 2022 in a while. And receivers, it's not going to live up to 2024, but it's an okay receiver class. Running back, I really do like the running back group. Linebackers, I mean, there's a few that you could be a little bit intrigued by. The Danny Stutzman, Harold Perkins, and Jahad Campbell. I think Jahad might be moved to D-line. I don't know. Jahad, I have to look more into his tape, but I've liked some of it from what I've seen so far. And yeah, I think 2025 is a really interesting draft class in terms of there's defensive talent, but offensive talent's a little weak. I think it fits some needs for teams in terms of interior offensive line play, the interior defensive line play, cornerbacks. I mean, there's always going to be a need for cornerbacks in the NFL level, and running backs. Because this year, if there's a big takeaway from this NFL season, interior offensive line play is really important. I mean, that's always been a thing, but more important than ever. And running backs are really, really, really needed again. Not for bad teams, but for good teams. I could see good teams or teams that are thinking they're near contender level status taking risks on running backs. Maybe the Cowboys do take Jetney, like a lot of people are saying. I don't know. As a Cowboys fan, I'm really trying to decide or think about it. It's a very hard decision because of where the Cowboys are and what they desperately need, and Jetney could be more of a luxury piece. And then just looking down the board, I think there is guys that could pop out of nowhere. I don't want to take away and say there are no game changers in this draft because that's not true. Every draft has someone. Every draft is going to have someone. 22 was a draft that was really talented outside of quarterback, and not a lot of people were excited for it because of the lack of quarterbacks. But 22 had a lot of guys, changed a lot of teams' futures. If you go look at the Lions, Cowboys had an incredible 2022 draft class, despite the last 2 years not being great not working out for them in the draft. 2022 was incredible, and that's why the Cowboys went 12-5 that year and the next year. I think you just got to wait out. I think it's November, and I know I'm making this early too, but April is 4 months away, and we'll just see. This is Son of a Sports. I'll catch y'all next time.